I first learned about J.R.R. Tolkien's best-known stories, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, as a child watching some old animated movies made in the 1970s. I just really loved the premise of the tales. Stubborn but intrepid little people on adventures that included dwarves and elves and wizards and dragons and, of course, a quest to save the world. I finally read the Lord of the Rings trilogy as a senior in high school, and I discovered a richness of storytelling I had never encountered before. It was a whole world, an entire history that came to life in the mind of one man. His descriptions were so detailed and extravagant and satisfying, and like any other book except the Bible, I would get the Lord of the Rings out every 3 or 4 years and lose myself in them again. As I got older, I read more about Tolkien and his faith, and I began to understand the Lord of the Rings as much bigger than Middle-earth. It contained many parallels with Christianity. There were deeper levels to the story, so many archetypes to explore. It made me love the books even more. The meaning of Tolkien's stories in my life also has evolved since my childhood. Today, the quest of Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee to destroy Sauron's evil ring of power actually holds a much more personal meaning for me, especially with regard to friendship. As a Christian, I find a great deal of hope in the truth that God has a plan for our lives, and I believe I was meant to meet Amy. On the surface, Amy and I seemed as different as Frodo and Sam. If you know the Lord of the Rings, you'll remember Frodo was a well-read, comfortably well-off hobbit, thanks to his Uncle Bilbo, and Sam was a humble gardener. So Amy liked to be outwardly funny and sarcastic and edgy, and I was more reserved. Many of our personal interests and tastes differed, although we certainly do have things in common. But Amy had a side to her that was very analytical and deeply thoughtful, character traits I am drawn to in friends. And I would catch those momentarily, glimpses, and that's all because she was a very guarded person. She didn't let people get close to her. To be honest, I'm not a person who makes friends easily myself. We both have a lot of introvert tendencies. But over time, we're talking at least a couple years, the two of us slowly connected through conversations and little get-togethers. We often talked about intriguing and challenging subjects, especially regarding our Christian faith. She started to hang out with my family more often. My first trip to Mordor with Amy, which is how I think of it now, came sometime during our 3rd year of friendship, I think. We were friends, but it wasn't until then that I began to realize she might struggle with depression, not the situational kind, the clinical kind. Before that, I certainly recognized some quirky things about her, but I remember how she changed seemingly overnight. It was like she was weighed down, like Frodo with the ring. Trying to help her return to a stable place, it was really tough. I wasn't an expert, I didn't have any special powers. I remember having to persevere, encouraging her, praying for her, talking with her. There were times I thought, this is crazy. She's crazy. Why am I doing this? It would be so much easier to turn around and walk away. But like Sam with Frodo, even carrying Frodo at one point, I continued on until one day the burden was lifted. She was able to throw the ring into the fire, at least for a little while. Amy's difficulties with depression didn't end, of course, but our friendship deepened. After we'd been friends about 4 years, I went through a very difficult time with a close family member. And while I carried my own ring, Amy walked with me to Mordor. In fact, as a result of my struggle, Amy realized it was okay to ask for help for herself. And for the first time, she sought treatment for depression. There have been a couple journeys to Mordor since, and there will probably be more in the future. Thankfully, God always brings us back to Rivendell and the Shire for rest. But we watched the Lord of the Rings movies together not that long ago, and that's when it hit us. As friends, we were like Frodo and Sam. They had a covenant friendship, a rare thing in today's world. We have come to think of ourselves as not only Frodo and Sam, but as covenant friends, women who met by chance and sisters by choice. In fact, Amy has become like an aunt to our girls. It doesn't take away from other friendships in our lives either. Amy and I recognize the importance of having other good friends, like the Fellowship was to Frodo and Sam. After all, without Gandalf, Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, Merry, Pippin, and even Boromir, they could not have finished their quest. Of course, there was Gollum. We're kind of hoping we don't run into anyone like him on our journey.